Good afternoon. Thank you for joining our webinar. Our topic is the 13 signals of a post-COVID new normal for the global travel and tourism industry. And this is the third in a series we've been producing, a series of insights briefs. Our first was on the food sector, and then the second one was on government services. And this third one, we're happy to focus on the travel and tourism industry. Now, allow me to acknowledge the team that worked on this report. But first, a little bit about Dinar Standard. So Dinar Standard is a growth strategy advisory and execution partner. We help organizations and governments in their growth, and we rely on fact-based insights and strategies. We advise destinations and governments on their growth strategies as well as different sectors. And we are based we have offices in New York, in Dubai, and in Jakarta. Now, allow me to introduce the report authors. So Mr. Sabta Nirwanzar, he is ex-Deputy Minister of Tourism of the Republic of Indonesia. And he is a Dinar, Alaikum Assalam wa Rahmatullah, and he is a Dinar Standard Associate Partner. And he is also chairman of the Indonesia Halal Lifestyle Center and Indonesia Tourism Forum. He's based obviously in Jakarta, Indonesia. And Rafiuddin Shiko, he's managing partner of Dinar Standard, and he is based in Dubai. I am Reem Al-Shafaki, Director Growth Strategies at Dinar Standard. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. And my colleague, Nahla Misbah, Senior Associate of Dinar Standard, is based in Cairo. So as you can see, we're a global team, and we're happy to be on this webinar. And now before we get started, Mr. Sabta, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Ribs. That I think we recognize we are really a very good team. You can imagine one in Hellas, one in Jakarta, and 2 or 3 in Dubai. You know, this can constructive thinking about how we can contribute this impact of very dramatic, what we call the pandemic, this pandemic. Not only, you know, in social life and economy, but also even in religious practices. And, you know, I just 2 weeks ago has arrived to go to the mosque. You can imagine this pandemic, right? Of course, the very severely one infected by this pandemic COVID is tourism sector, globally and also locally and nationally. That's why this webinar, we try to discuss and bring some ideas in this report, because 16 signal how to revive the tourism sector and also the travel sector globally. I believe this webinar can bring something, solution, and we can discuss later on how the action plan should be done in the government, in the industry, of course, also in the society. Things don't go away. You just stay in the webinar, and you will have the signal positive to the international and tourism and travel globally. Thank you, Reem.
Thank you, Mr. Sabta. I appreciate your opening remarks. And before we get started, throughout this webinar, we have a couple of, so I'll keep it on for a couple more minutes in case you didn't get a chance to answer, but I'll get started. And first, an intro on the purpose of this brief. So as we know, and as Mr. Sabta mentioned, the tourism and travel sector have been hit the hardest in terms of this current crisis. And most of the sector and governments are really in crisis management mode. But we're being asked, so what comes after this? what will the new normal post the COVID-19 crisis look like? And by now we all realize that it is not going to look the same as before the crisis. So what is it going to look like? And a more important question is, how can the tourism industry not only survive, but thrive after this crisis? And an important point about our approach, and let me end the polling. I'll share with you the results of the poll in a few minutes. So in terms of our approach, we are not looking at immediate solutions for the crisis. I feel there are a lot of others who are doing that. The purpose of this brief is really focused on post the crisis, after the crisis, and we are talking of a time frame based on medical experts, a time frame of 1 to 3 years for when a solution in terms from the medical perspective will be available. So we are realistically looking at from the summer or fall of next year, 2021. So this is the time frame, and it's important to note that in terms of the signals and action plans that we're discussing, that's the time frame that we're looking at. Now, in terms of the breakdown of this brief and of this webinar, is first we'll touch base on very quickly on the state of travel pre-COVID, pre the COVID-19 crisis, and then we'll discuss the impact of the crisis on consumers, on the industry, and on governments. And then the important part of this brief really, and the part that we'd like to focus on more, is the 13 signals we've identified of what might come post the COVID-19 crisis, and an action plan for what the industry and what government can do. So this is really the outline of what we will speak about. We expect the duration to be a little over an hour, so about an hour and 10 or about an hour and 15 minutes, including questions and answers. So please remember, if you have any questions, to click on the Q&A button and ask your question. And also throughout the webinar, to make sure to go through other questions that you see and vote up the questions that you would like to see answered. And we will attempt to answer the top ones at the end of this webinar. Now, before I start sharing this first slide on the pre-COVID travel and tourism sector, let's quickly, I'll share the results of the poll. So the first question was kind of a fun question, getting to know where everyone is in terms of willingness to travel. So the question is, would you travel again for leisure before the virus is completely eradicated? And we have 53% said yes, and 47% said no. I would have expected more towards the yes from us being from the tourism sector, but interesting to see. And in terms of the other question was kind of a quiz in terms of how many jobs do you think are supported by the travel and tourism sector around the world? And we have the answer here. It's actually 319 million, and 20% of respondents got that right. The majority said 430 million. I'll share the rest, or actually my colleague Nahla will share the rest of the results of the poll, or I'll share it once Nahla starts her section. Now, in terms of pre-COVID, the value of travel was 8.8 trillion. It was 10.4% of global GDP. So that's kind of our baseline. In terms of challenges pre-COVID, there have been sustainability issues over tourism, which was related to sustainability. The industry is highly fragmented and in dire need of additional regulation. So those are the main issues we've identified. Now on the right here, we've identified challenges by sector, and looking at transportation, mainly focusing on aviation. Fluctuating oil prices are a challenge, overcapacity competition from low-cost carriers. In terms of accommodation, hotels have been suffering from the dominance of OTAs, and they're dictating the commissions. I know that's always an issue. And then also there's been suffering from an excess of hotel brands. In terms of activities, so looking at theme parks and museums, for example, crowd management is an issue and security is an issue. In terms of food services, so restaurants, there's stiff competition and then the challenge of food sourcing. In terms of travel services, and we're looking, and under this we have included OTAs and travel agencies and DMOs. So the dominance again is top OTAs dominating the market. And then in terms of DMOs, destination management organizations, a lot of times we're seeing that they're actually more destination marketing organizations and don't have a strong role in terms of management, which I feel really needs to change in terms of also helping resolve issues related to this crisis. Now, jumping to the left side in terms of global risks. So these were as a result of a survey to experts that the World Economic Forum conducts on an annual basis. And in terms of, it asks experts and futurists on the risks that they see, the top ones they see likely to happen and that will have the most impact. And it is interesting to see that among the top 10 in terms of impact is infectious diseases. And we are in fact experiencing and witnessing the impact. Now this middle chart, I won't go through it in detail, but it shows the top countries globally in terms of tourism receipts and also the top countries per region. So number one globally is the US, followed by Spain, France, Thailand, and the UK in terms of the top 5. And a reminder to ask your questions in the Q&As, and we will do our best to answer them. Moving on to the impact. So impact on consumer behavior, and we've identified 4 main areas of impact. Now these are not exclusive, but those are the top ones that we feel have the main impact. So number 1 is health and safety concerns. And as we can see, these are the COVID-19 numbers updated from 2 days ago. Here in the US, we're over 2 million. And I heard that the EU is planning not to allow US travelers to enter, and which I don't blame them. Number 2, we've identified domestic travel and less popular destinations preferred. And OECD has identified that, is projecting that domestic travel will be 75% of tourism for this year. That's the forecast. And it makes sense in terms of travelers not being able to travel internationally, and they turn instead to domestic travel. In terms of intent to travel, that's different depending on generation and age. And there's a reluctance to travel from older generations. So if we look at millennials, only 11% of millennials will not book a trip during a pandemic, compared to 25% of baby boomers. And in general, in terms of sentiment, so this is a result of a survey by Bloom Consulting, and it shows that between 35 and 45% of respondents will not travel again unless the virus is fully eradicated. And that's a big percentage. And 64% of them cite that they feel unsafe while traveling. Now, it's important to remember that sentiments change over time, and I know several of these surveys are being conducted on a weekly or monthly basis, and they're being benchmarked. So sentiments do change, but that was based on one of the latest surveys shared by Bloom Consulting. Now, in terms of substitutes to travel, it's interesting to note we're all seeing how staying at home or limited movement has led to different activities. We know a lot of people are watching more, they're consuming more media, they're going on group video calls more, they're learning. So here are some statistics. There's been an increase in video gaming, 75% increase. There's been an increase in group video chats, so Facebook groups, which is fairly new, and then Snapchat video. And all of us working from home have been using Zoom extensively, and we're even using Zoom for this webinar, and I know a lot of the webinars are using Zoom. Zoom's stock has actually increased by 101% since the beginning of the year, and it's worth now $50 billion, which is more than the 7 biggest airlines combined. Let me repeat that. So Zoom's stock is bigger than the 7 biggest airlines combined. That says a lot. Netflix has seen a 28% revenue increase compared to last year. And in terms of course enrollment, online learning, as an example, the website Udemy, which is an online learning platform, saw a 425% increase in online course enrollment because of the COVID-19 crisis. So these are some impacts that we're seeing. And again, a reminder to please ask any questions and click on the Q&A button to ask your question, and also to vote on other questions that you'd like us to answer. Now, moving on in terms of the impact on the industry. And we see 5 main impact areas on the industry. The biggest sectors being affected are the aviation and hospitality sectors. Number 2, SMEs are in crisis. Number 3, there is rapid innovation in touchless travel and protocols related to hygiene and health. Number 4, companies are pivoting and doing aggressive promotions to maintain revenue streams. And 5, there are very great investment implications due to this crisis. Now, in terms of aviation and hospitality, here are some of the figures in terms of impact and losses. So the airline industry, IATA estimates that their losses are $84 billion for this year. This is their projection. For hotels, it's $112 billion in hotel losses, and 1.6 million hotel employees are out of work. So the impact, as you can see, is major. In terms of SMEs, they represent 80% of the tourism industry. And so they are integral and very important part of the industry, and they impact global economies. So it is alarming in terms of the effect of this crisis that it is having on SMEs. And OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, predicts that 50% of SMEs will not make it in the next few months. They will not survive the crisis. So this is definitely an important area for governments to remember to focus on in terms of support, whether it's fiscal support or other. Now, in terms of innovation, we're seeing innovation in touchless technology. We're seeing robotics in hotels. We're seeing touchless kiosks. So all of this innovation, and I've heard business leaders say that innovations that they had slated for the next 10 plus years, they are implementing now in 2 months. So this is interesting to witness. And in terms of hygiene standards, we're seeing a lot of standards sprouting from whether it's the private sector, international organizations, or bodies that are new startups that like SANSI that just started for that in terms of focusing on to certify. And that just tells us that's an important impact on the industry, and it addresses the need for health and safety. Now, in terms of the financial impact, investment-related impact, as expected, there has been a drop in investments. And for example, in Asia, there's been a 42% drop in leisure investments. But a silver lining or a ray of hope is that there have been investments that have been secured even during this time of crisis. So Norwegian Cruise Lines, they were able to secure 400 million in investment. And I know the Saudi PIF fund, they invested in Carnival, also close to $400 million. We are seeing there is a venture capital company that Thayer Ventures that set aside a fund just to invest in travel and transportation technology, an $80 million fund. We are seeing startups that are being funded. So Fly Now, Pay Later, which is a startup from London, and it's developing a flexible payment technology. It was able to raise close to $44 million. And Hotel Data Cloud, which is another startup based from Dubai, was able to secure $350K. And Traveloka is close to securing another investment round. So this is a reminder that I wanted to end on this positive note of some hope in terms of investments going on in the sector. And now I'd like to pass it on to Nahla to share the impact of COVID-19 on government policies. And Nahla, let me know when you'd like me to share the results of the poll in terms of the question about fiscal policies being adopted
Thank you
to support the industry.
So the areas where the biggest impact was felt for government policies, we have identified 5 top areas: economic and job losses, travel restrictions, the creation of travel bubbles, the increase in medical needs, and the formulation of sustainability regulations. So in terms of economic losses, the UNWTO has estimated the loss in export revenues from tourism for this year to be between $910 billion to $1.2 trillion, which is a huge loss. There is also another problem, that of employment, because the tourism sector employs 10% of the global employment population. And we are looking at close to 2/3 of these jobs at risk. So up to 197.5 million jobs are at risk at this moment. Already governments are rolling out stimulus packages everywhere, and according to the OECD, governments have rolled out up to $9 trillion in stimulus for the economy in general. In terms of countries rolling out fiscal stimulus plans for the industry itself, we have now up to 144 countries doing that. And Neem, if you can please share with us the number that the participants have guessed in terms of countries rolling out fiscal stimulus plans?
Yes, sure. So 43% of participants guessed that there are 84 fiscal policies, 30% guessed there are 124, 17% guessed there are 144, and 13% guessed there are 164. So I guess 17% guessed the correct answer.
Okay, great. That means everybody who's attending is already very well immersed into the information on tourism at the moment. So, and also in terms of training, there are 100 countries already rolling out also training for the people who are working in the tourism sector, because many of the jobs are not coming back. So maybe retraining is needed in order to help these people find jobs as well. In terms of our second signal, travel restrictions and regulation, as soon as COVID started, all countries around the world started imposing restrictions. And on June 1st, we had 156 countries who have completely closed borders. This might be changing soon. We hear that starting July, the image might change a bit, but nothing is for certain till now. And in dealing with that, we come to our third point, which is the creation of travel bubbles. Countries which are...
Yes, I think one thing is the important while we think Nahla setting the what is the signal. I think the number second and number three, the impacts of concerning a travel restriction and regulation, and also travel bubbles. These are very important issues internationally. As have been raised this question to UNWTO conference, and why there is nowadays still very strong restriction even in neighborhood countries. You can see Australia just want to release the travel restriction in July, August. There's nobody can travel to Jakarta to Indonesia, and also the bubble still in negotiation. That's I think the internationally has to be discussed and also has to be what is pushed to look at really in realistic problem of this restriction, right? Because since we are so members of international association, I think and that's level we can discuss between also in regional association like ASEAN, even Asia Pacific Conference, something like that. Just go ahead, Nabila. I just while you has a little bit of sound, I just give a comment for impact number second and number third, or number 2 and 3, please.
Oh, Dallas, we I don't think anyone wants anyone from Dallas to travel. Even New York are now saying that travelers from other states that have high incidence of coronavirus, they have to self-quarantine. So no one wants travelers from Dallas right now. But in terms of travel bubbles, and we're seeing that a lot of countries are cooperating among themselves and are agreeing on air corridors, as they're being called, or travel bubbles, or
I think I switched now to a completely different online network. Hopefully it wouldn't cut me off again. So,
okay, sure. And Nahla, I started explaining about travel bubbles, but I'll hand it over to you. I haven't shared examples yet, so I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. So with the examples of travel bubbles, we have already in Asia, Australia and New Zealand having one of the first bubbles. We have Singapore and Indonesia both talking to other countries in the region to form their own travel bubbles. We have in Europe also several examples in the Baltic region with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania forming their own. Also Norway and Denmark also forming their own travel bubble. Our fourth signal is that of an increase in medical needs, and this is not only for the general population, but also for tourists. Now destinations Turkey with rolling out intensive care units and ventilators close to attractions. That's also another thing. Our final signal is that of the creation or the formulation of sustainability regulation. With the pause in tourism that happened, countries started realizing that they need to work more on sustainability issues and ensure a more sustainable tourism in the future. And with this, we finish the impact of government policies, and we can move now to the signal part. So based on our analysis of travel data, consumer trends, and industry actions, we have identified 13 signals of a post-COVID new normal for the tourism industry. And 8 of those are for the industry, and this my colleague Reem will explain them, and 5 are in the government. I'll be back to explain them later on. So to you, Reem. Now you can start on your signals.
Thank you, Nahla. And to give an overview in terms of signals, what we mean by signals, so we're looking at activities that we're seeing starting to happen right now, sometimes on a small scale or a limited scale, but we are expecting that they will continue post the COVID-19 crisis and that they will continue strongly. So this is really the basis of focusing on these. And we've identified some of the top signals. We're seeing, of course, a lot more than what we've included here, but these we've identified as the top ones. So number one, and this is quite obvious in terms of hygiene and safety, is actually becoming one of the criteria that travelers will look at when they make a decision in terms of choosing a destination. So it's very important that, and the industry and governments have already recognized this, and this can be seen by all of the different certifications that have sprouted very quickly in terms of certifying the industry and certifying different tourism players in terms of health, safety, and hygiene. So we expect this will continue post the crisis, because now that it has happened, it's at the back of people's minds. They know there can be a reoccurrence. They know there can be other incidents of pandemics. So this is a signal of an activity that we believe will continue. Now, in terms of contactless travel innovation, which, as mentioned, is accelerating very rapidly, and we're seeing so much happening in such a short amount of time for touchless travel, really, and contactless payment, kiosks at hotels, touchless elevators, kiosks at airports, and solutions to avoid queuing, robotics at hotels. So all of this, we expect the acceleration to continue beyond the COVID-19 crisis and not to stop then. The rise in domestic travel that we're witnessing right now out of necessity, really, also we expect this to continue as tourism players realize that they can't depend solely on international travelers, that when something happens, that it is good to have a strong domestic traveler base or customer base. So I believe that tourism players will build stronger products that address the needs of local travelers and will increase their promotions to local customers. So this is a trend that we're seeing. Number 4, in terms of signals, we are seeing an opportunity for boutique travel agencies. And let me just say that when we say boutique travel agencies, we're not saying that, a disclaimer, we still expect OTAs to be very strong and to continue to dominate. But we are saying that, I know this seems a little bit counterintuitive, but we're saying that there is an opportunity for medium-sized boutique travel agencies who can offer customized and one-on-one service, especially there is going to be a lot of ambiguity in terms of requirements and new requirements like health passports, for example, immunity passports, and even some destinations will have differing requirements. So having someone to be able to consult with, and rather than a call center, but someone having more personalized service to advise on that. Like, for example, Cambodia is demanding that travelers deposit $3,000 to cover any virus prevention activities or services, and the balance will be returned. But something like information like this, it's very important to know in terms of would-be travelers. So we see here an opportunity for medium-sized boutique travel agencies. Now, in terms of number 5, we all know that millennials have been an important segment for the tourism industry even before the COVID-19 crisis, but now they are even more important along with their counterparts, the older Gen Zs who are, right now they're either in college or graduating college. They are more willing to take risks in the current environment and upcoming environment, and that has been shown from surveys. We've even seen it, like here in the U.S., we've seen how millennials and Gen Zs, they disregarded stay-at-home orders and they were actually vacationing. There was spring break that was in March. At the height of all of the closures, they were vacationing on the beaches of Florida, and even the government of Florida was reprimanding them and asking them to stay at home. So I'm not condoning this behavior. I'm just saying that they are willing to take risks. They feel they will not be as affected as older generations if they do get sick. So they are an important segment to continue targeting and to continue tailoring your products and services to. Now, number 6, sustainability as a priority, and I see one of the questions that have been asked, and we'll try to address it in the Q&A. I know Benjamin, you asked that question. We'll try to answer it, but there has been a lot of talk about sustainability, and we're all seeing the effects of really the standstill or the pause in travel, the positive effects on the environment. We're seeing clearer skies, clearer waterways and oceans. We're seeing a return of wildlife, and there will be a segment, it's not going to be all segments, but there will be additional segments that will start considering traveling sustainably and will be willing to pay more to travel with a company that is more conscious about its impact on the local community, on the environment, and conscious about giving back. So this is one of the other signals. And number 7 is focusing on funding opportunity from travel tech startups. And I'd mentioned a few examples earlier that show even in the midst of a crisis, there is an opportunity for this sector, and this will continue beyond the COVID-19 crisis. And this is also an investment opportunity for investors. And we've identified this as an important signal. Now, in terms of number 8, this signal talks about broadening business models to hedge tourism risks. And we're seeing that a lot. Like a lot of companies they're expanding beyond their regular services. We're seeing Airbnb and Viator offering services with hosts. So offering, being able to streamline, to talk with hosts and have sessions with local hosts, and whether they are paid or free, this can be an additional service that can be added. I just recently saw that Air Canada is offering their free at-home streaming for their loyalty members. They're offering that for a month. This can be expanded upon and offered as a paid service, especially that they already have the inventory for that. So these are some examples of companies that are already looking to expand their business models, and we're expecting to see a lot more of that as businesses try to hedge their tourism risks. And now that concludes our signals for the industry. And before I pass it on to Nahla to discuss signals for governments, I'd like to get Mr. Sapta's commentary on these signals for the industry. So these 8 industry signals, the ones that you see, if you would like to comment.
Yes. Thank you, Rim. I think we'll be back for this very interesting and important certain signal of post-COVID COVID-19 to the new normal. First thing, of course, we have to really conscious about the hygiene and cleanliness or hygiene, healthy cleaning protocol. Yes, this is not a very extreme one, but some offer has been done also by some big hoteliers. They offer like services, rapid test for the COVID. Some also they asking for the client like PCR test, and these are provided freely. And when they has been tested, they can join even for the meeting in this hotel. I think this, I don't want to announce the big group or the emphasize or the plan for this one. I think this is reflecting how important of hygiene and of course the healthy concern. And for the second, of course, yeah, this is a little bit pity, you know, why? In the tourism normally not high tech, but high touch. But during the new normal, we has less touch or touchless and contactless. That's of course this is important in order not only physical distancing, also how we use the contactless travel innovation. This of course should be backed up by IT. And now I think many are startup as a number 4 startup, and also the IT big group give some proposal and some new ideas how we can make contactless in travel innovation. You can see in Thailand, in Bangkok, now we don't need to push the lift numbers. We just use our, our shoes, just knock the bottom up, and then the door is closed or the door is open, right? There's a number. I don't want going one by one, and there's some important area. Because I like very much number 7. It's not because SAPTA. 7 is mean funding for travel technology startup. You can see this is a dilemma for the industry of tourism, especially. They are actually suffering for cash in, mean the cash flow is with a trouble for months. Many of industry has closed down or is not operating. But they have to reinvest in the new area, especially for technology, for arranging all the presentation, in the food and also in beverage, and also in the way they serve. Before we have 40 or 50 table, actually they have only 20. That can be arranged. Also, what we call the decoration should be also changed. There was also check-in counter and everything is related with the new normal needed, right? Then of course some particular area in the destination. I think this is important because destination should be also use innovation in developing a new product, new services, and upgrading also the quality of their services is especially related with the health requirement or the protocol requirement. Otherwise, we are going to destination, especially in attraction, theme park, sport tourism, and etc. I think this is also important to the new investment and of course business model in the near future. I think this is already covered in the certain signal of post-COVID what have been done with our team, right? Okay, I think this is my comment for new normal and for the industry. And then later on, I will join also some particular area for the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sapta. Thank you for your very interesting comments. I especially liked how, travel from...
Better call me Pak Sapta. That's good, Pak Sapta. More tenders.
Okay, Pak Sapta. And maybe you could call me Bu Reem.
Yes.
No, Reem is fine.
Yeah. This tourism is smile, tourism is relaxed, tourism is not in hospital. Tourism is hospitality. Means have to be clear and also really happy.
That's true. And I liked very much your comment in terms of, you know, how tourism, which is high touch, is now becoming touchless and contactless. Very, very interesting comment. Now, before I pass it on to Nahla to talk about government, a reminder again to please post your questions on the Q&A and to please vote up for the questions that you'd like to see answered. So when we move to our Q&A session, we can focus on those. And I think it's time for another poll. So let me see. Okay, I'll launch our next poll, which is basically 2 questions, and I'll give you a few moments to answer it. I don't see a lot of people answering now. I think more are answering now, and feel free to guess. And this is really also, in your opinion, what you think in terms of priorities for the industry and the government. Okay, I'll keep it open for a few more minutes, but I'll pass it on to Nahla to talk about signals for the government, new normal for the government.
Okay, so the signals we have identified for government in the new normal, the top one is crisis preparedness, of course. And this is in all sectors, but specifically also in the tourism sector. Governments have realized that they need to prepare some kind of crisis playbook. They need to address the problems that have arisen as a result of COVID-19. They need to invest more in the aviation and hospitality sector. They need to provide more support for SMEs, whether in terms of financial or technical support. They also need to take care of the people employed by the tourism sector, because a problem like COVID-19 has shown how fragile employment in the sector can be. So this is our first signal. Our second signal for government is the need for regulations for safety and hygiene, especially since a lot of entities are now proposing their own protocols. We have international entities like the WTTC. We have the private sector, several entities coming up with their own regulations. And here we need the government to step in and standardize, because if we're having within a certain country, it needs to be standardized across all providers. Our next signal, can you?
Yes, sure.
Our next signal is that of tourism corridors. Already you have seen a lot of travel bubbles being created between countries that have similar situations now. And we anticipate that this will continue and will be part of the new normal, with countries going into agreements, providing certain incentives for residents from the countries that are part of this tourism corridor to travel and see the other country, and residents as well. So that's a very important positive aspect of the impact of COVID-19, that the product like this tourism corridors has gained a certain level of attention from countries, and we anticipate that it's going to be built on. Another important signal that we see as part of the new normal is the need for destination to reconfigure for safety. And we've seen this already in a lot of destinations around the world, with airports trying to provide a safe experience for travelers. We think that the government, and they have started already investing in this, but we predict that this will continue. They will need to invest more and more in this in order to provide a safe and hygienic experience for tourists. And we've seen that there have been some mobile apps already being developed to avoid over-tourism or queuing in certain areas, and this is also expected to be to increase in the coming period. For our next signal, and last one for the government, is the idea of incorporating sustainability in tourism plans. Already the big pools in tourism have made lots of governments around the world reconsider the effect of over-tourism on their countries. We've seen, I'm sure all of you have seen across the Facebook and everywhere else, wild animals returning to their habitats and better environment and all this. And they have started to realize that the local people need this. They need to see their place without the over-tourism. And if we get tourism back, we need to anticipate how can we operate in a sustainable way. And we've already seen entities like Greenpeace demanding that if you're providing airline bailouts, please give them stricter conditions in order to ensure less carbon footprint and so on. We've also seen some countries around the world right now, or cities like Paris, Milan, they're trying now to create more bike lanes, more pedestrian-friendly environments. They're rethinking who are the tourists that we want back. So we hope to see this continue, and we anticipate that it will continue to a large extent. And that brings us to the end of the signals for the government. And here I would like also to invite Pasapta to tell us if he has any more insights on the signals for government.
You're muted, Pasapta. If you can unmute yourself.
Yes. Okay. Shukran, Nala. I just would like to underline the number 12 is concerning destination. But since in tourism, there is a very famous formula that what we call 3A. One is accessibility, of course, this concerning the airport, airline, everything related with the accessibility, right? And even for the local transportation, this is important. There has to be also under the protocol, health protocol, I mean, under the new normal life. Otherwise, we cannot go be successful because one missing, it's not what you call integrated. And the second thing is, of course, the amenities. Amenities is related to the hotel, restaurant, cafe, spa, and many things supported for the tourism. And of course, even the salon, barbecue, barber shop, not barbecue, barber shop. Also, you know, even for the Muslimah, there is also special salon for that. And of course, the number 3 is very important. Without this one, I think we're not going to this destination. And inside of destination, there is attraction. Mean the how we are going to Dubai, because I want to go to, you know, the biggest mall, and then in the mall there is big aquarium inside the mall. This is fantastic. This is unique. Now I'm going to Dallas just to see something related to the very famous film there. That's destination. Indonesia has many of destination, world-class destination. I think this world-class destination, cultural-based, and of course marine tourism-based, sport-based, even the man-made destination. I think we are going to open or reopen to restarting this kind of destination step by step, accordingly to the protocol, healthy protocol, that we are going to more safely first. There may be the outdoor activity, like go to the mountain, go to the, you know, particular area, even though we have to settle up what we call the visitor management, like theme park. Maybe before they can fit 1,000 people. Now we have to reduce to 100 or 300, and we follow the, accordingly the system by using maybe online system and etc. etc. Even a museum, museum just has to be online and follow requirement of safety, and especially to the healthy protocol, also health protocol. I think this is a relative destination. Even, you know, many of Asian countries, they like very much, what is that? Culinary. Of course, this is no problem because they are going to the restaurant, they have it. But one thing, the shopping mall and traditional market has to be also touched by this protocol. I think the number 12 is very important for the safety. No safety, no travel. That's now. Then this safety is that's first. I think this in this certain signal we have been done important what is the code or the signal for the industry and also for the government. This is number 12. And just I would like to give the comment on number 2. But of course, the others has been done and explained goodly and perfectly by Nahla. Thank you, Nahla.
Thank you. Thank you, Fasaf.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fasaf. Now moving on to the action plan, which is really our last section in this presentation, in this webinar, before we move on to the Q&As, and a reminder to ask your questions and vote up the questions. And let me share the results of the poll before I get started on explaining the slide. So we had 2 questions. Let me end the polling so we can share the results. So the first question was, what are the industry priorities in your opinion for the new normal? And 56% said implementing strict hygiene and health cleaning protocols. 25% said adopting contactless solutions. And 19% said focusing on provision of sustainable products. Now, on the question, the second question is on what are the government priorities in your opinion for the new normal? 19% said crisis preparedness. 42% said regulate hygiene and safety certification. And 40% said provide sustainability regulations. So thank you for participating in the poll. Now to discuss action plans. And again, a reminder that we are not looking at the immediate crisis. We're not looking for solutions for the next 6 to 12 months. We are actually looking beyond that. And this is a framework that we put together that looks at, it is segmented based on return, which looks at after the crisis, immediately after the crisis is resolved, so the transition period, and then reform, which is more focusing on setting up operations to be ready for the next phase, which is the reinvent phase, where we're becoming creative and innovative and providing new solutions and doing things in efficient and better ways. So this is how it's segmented. So in terms of return, the obvious first step is to make sure that health and safety are strongly incorporated in the product offerings, and also very importantly, are communicated. So for reassurance, since some travelers, as we mentioned, this is one of the important criteria that they will be looking at, reassurance in terms of health and safety. So it's important. It will really be part of, I wouldn't say the focus of the marketing communication, but it needs to be communicated somehow and made clear. And perhaps some of these certifications, once they get more regulated, that will be, a simple way of communicating that. If you have a stamp that you are in the clear in terms of you have these certain hygiene and safety protocols in place and you have been audited for that. Now, in terms of reform, we feel that developing new business models is very important, since we've all seen how the sector is very susceptible to outside events, and it can be very strongly impacted. So I've shared the example from Air Canada. We're seeing hotels offering services in terms of in-home catering. They can perhaps offer laundry services and really expand their offerings. I've seen hotels in several countries in Australia, the US, and Japan offering renting or booking a room for the day as an alternative to working from home. And this can be something as a standard practice as more people might continue working from home post this crisis. So services such as these, and restaurants, we're seeing restaurants offering groceries, since there has been an increase in grocery shopping during the pandemic, and in offering frozen prepared meals. So this can be expanded and become part of the business model. And also important to continue including domestic travelers as an important travel segment and continue marketing to them. Now, in terms of reinventing, and we're looking at a few of the sectors. I realize this is not comprehensive for all of the sectors, but we selected a few of the sectors and really focused on a few ideas in terms of reinventing. So for destinations, the MICE industry really needs to be reconfigured. They are, so far, they haven't been too receptive to technology, but seeing everything that has accelerated because of this crisis and the need for social distancing and the fact that MICE really depends on getting a large group of people together, so they really need to reconfigure the industry. And the second recommended action plan is focusing on public-private partnerships to support destinations. And it's very clear from this crisis that the private sector cannot do it on their own and the governments cannot do it on their own. There really needs to be strong PPP collaboration. And then an important point is implementing strategies to attract investment. I know, Pasafta, in an earlier discussion, you had mentioned, yes, with all of the cleaning protocols and all of that, well, but who will pay for it? And that's a very important point. It's a big cost. I just came across an article on Skift saying that, and it's estimated that the cost for hotels is $9 billion in terms of the hygiene and cleanliness and the new protocols that they need to implement. So that was a very important point that you mentioned, that, yeah, the big brands, maybe they can afford that. What about the smaller, privately owned small hotels? So investment is required for that, and as we mentioned, for technology. Now, in terms of travel agencies and OTAs, they're already focusing on artificial intelligence and machine learning, but there is much opportunity to focus even deeper and provide more intuitive recommendations and intuitive solutions to customers based on advanced technology. Hotels, as we're seeing, they need to totally reinvent the hotel experience, and hotels were slowly, and some faster than others, they were heading before the crisis towards having a less high-touch guest experience, a more smooth guest experience, but now it is a necessity. So touchless technology for hotels is definitely imperative. And in terms of restaurants and food services, so consider implementing cloud kitchens, which is basically focusing on food delivery and having one centralized kitchen that several hotels use. And this can be an extension of the restaurants use, and this can be an extension of the restaurant's dine-in services. So this is a summary, and this reinvent phase, that's a second phase, so from 1.5 years to 3 years. And these are some of the comments. I'll allow Nahla to go through the action plan.
Reem, please,
yes.
Before we continue to the last for the industry, it is much better if I just would like to add something for the government, please.
Yes, of course, for the industry.
Yes. I think plus the government for the government. Yes, this one. I think for the industry, for industry. Okay, sorry, for the industry. You're just talking about the industry, right? Yes. Okay. I think I would like to again to add something maybe interesting concerning the biggest industry in tourism is we call MICE. In Indonesia, we call Mice. Mice is same in supermarket, Juice. Juice is juice, but this is Mice, meeting, incentive, conference, and exhibition. The MICE is, according to the expert, the receipt is 3 times than leisure tourism. Means a lot of money involved in the MICE industry. And of course, actually, especially in Bali, Jakarta, in a big city, all the convention center are closed. Okay, this is impact of pandemic. We have to admit. But some industry reinvent, make an innovation in order, to what is called to restart this MICE industry. What they are making only just they invent of course by using the technology, the IT. There is a virtual international expo. You can imagine virtual international expo, and of course all the booth and etc. designing by virtual. Then this is first thing they reinvent for the MICE. Second thing, of course, this is 50-50, what we call hybrid event. You can imagine normally convention center or exhibition center fit for 3,000. They're only just 200, 300, especially for the buyers, made to buyers, B2B. And the others, why? They're using the virtual that we call hybrid. Now, there are many of industry MICE offer this kind of activity in the MICE industry. Before, of course, 1 to 3 years when all the things come new normal. And the other things related with the food industry is very important because food is really basic for the tourism. Without food, without restaurant, I think it's not tourism. This is the basic fundamental needed for the tourism or for the travelers. Nowadays, I think they also has to invent, and there is no buffet anymore. That's the boxes, the presentation, etc. That's this halal, I don't halal. This food supply chain should be controlled in terms of the healthy, etc. And needed also new equipment for that. I think this new investment in hotel, what you have been saying, I think this, I just like these 2 particular point. Thank you, Ren.
Thank you, Prof. Sapta. Thank you for your comments. Very interesting. I'll pass it on to Nahla, and then we'd love to hear your comments, Prof. Sapta, again in terms of for the government. So Nahla, it's all yours in terms of the action plan for government.
Okay, so the action plan for government, the same as the industry, within the same timeline. We have the 3 stages of return, reform, and reinvent. And of course, return is mainly dealing with crisis planning for the pandemic and future pandemics or future waves of corona or other pandemics. And this is a very important first step. Followed by reform, and here we have to bring up again, as Reem said, the private-public partnership. And this is a very important thing because we've seen that the investments required for saving this industry cannot be shouldered alone by the private sector. And also that the government needs to step in with regulations in order to ensure that everything is going smoothly with no problems. So here there is a very important need to reform and to have better linkage with the private sector for the industry. Another thing is also, as many of you have already voted, 40% mentioned that sustainability is really important. And in reform, we need to ensure that sustainability is a big part of tourism action plans for the coming period. Because this is an area where there have been a lot of talk before and very little action. And I think by now everybody knows that there needs to be a definite action in this area. And we come to the reinvent phase. And in this, we have 3 areas where governments need to reinvent and polish their policies. In the area of health and safety, they need to work better with the private sector and set up regulations for the different parts of the industry, whether hotels, restaurants, everybody, in order to ensure that there is a safe experience for tourists who will come back to the destinations. In the area of economic enablement, we have seen already the problems that the aviation sector has encountered, and how the bailouts everywhere around the globe for the aviation sector and hospitality sector. And this is something that needs to be clear mechanism for this in the long run. We need to have, governments need to have set up structures for this anticipation, what is going to happen next, and all this. This needs to happen for the future. With a focus again on public-private partnership, there needs to be consultation with the private sector. There needs to be talks and maybe platforms to exist in order for this to happen more easily. In addition to this, of course, there funding. There is need for help in funding for the transformation, for the hygiene and safety needs for all across the sectors, because these are all new needs, and it will be on the selection criteria of tourists everywhere. If they go to a place, they need to know that they are safe in that place. So, of course, this is something also that needs a big involvement from governments. The last area, which is social services, and here we come to the major problem of unemployment, problem that many countries are going to face as a result of the economic fallout of COVID-19. We've said already previously that close to 2/3 of the people employed in tourism, their jobs are at stake. So here there needs to be some kind of either targeted or universal basic income to deal with problems like this in the future, and for the people from COVID-19 and in the future as well. So this wraps up our action plan for governments, and I would also would like to invite, I think, but I'm not sure he's still on Pasapta to comment.
Pasapta, would you like to comment on the government action plan?
I think now Pasapta is having the same connection.
Oh, technical issues. Well, at least we're towards the end of our webinar, and if he joins in, we'll allow him to provide his comments.
So yes.
And actually, we're hoping to wrap up soon. And I know I'm seeing some interesting questions and comments. I think if we can focus perhaps on one of the questions. So Benjamin, you asked actually a couple of questions and provided comments on the issue of sustainability. If I can allow you to talk and for you to share your comments, and then we will provide our commentary as well. I think that will probably be the one question we're able to answer given the time. I don't want to make it too long for participants. I know you have other things that you need to do, and we'll try to answer the rest of the questions and send them by email along with this brief. You'll all be receiving in a few days a copy of this full brief. So Benjamin, if you're available, let me see if I can allow you to talk.
I think.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Great.
Please go ahead.
Well, so thanks very much for giving me an opportunity to talk during this fascinating session. As you would have gathered from my questions, I'm particularly interested in sustainability. I'm involved in sustainable tourism plans for a number of destinations just now, both in the Islamic world and elsewhere. But my questions are very much prompted by the fact that a lot of people are talking about putting community at the heart of the tourism recovery. And I'm not sure what people really mean by community. Certainly, governments and large organizations around the world are very involved in the immediate response and health response to the COVID crisis. But going forward, I think there's a real opportunity to explore how communities, destinations, small destinations can actually be at the heart of designing what is of benefit to the communities in each destination and democratizing the recovery. Because I think that without that democratization, we really aren't going to have a resilient tourism going forward, and that's what.
Apa coba?
Yeah, thank you for your comment, Benjamin, and that's a very valid comment. And I know in your question you were talking about, yes, everyone's talking about focusing on sustainability, but sometimes that can be at odds with trying to get tourism up and really manage this crisis to the industry. So Prasapta or Nahla, if you would like to comment on the issue of sustainability, and specifically, I'll read Benjamin's comment that he asked. So he's saying tourism had been due to be high on the agenda at November's G20 summit in Riyadh. Last year, there was much talk about sustainability, but most tourism organizations, UNWTO, IATA, PATA, etc., are now talking about accelerated growth post-COVID. Despite all the warm words about build back better, do you think sustainable tourism has in practice fallen off the agenda?
Yeah. Okay. I beg the signal is good actually. Okay, I think the interrupted a little bit, you know, there's Zimbabwe, Jakarta to United States and Dubai. I think for the sustainability tourism, I think any COVID or not, tourism must be respected to the environment. Like a good example, you have a good beach. If you don't maintaining in terms of environmentally sound, I think you're going to lose your customer. The necessity of, environment sustainability is really top priority in the tourism normally. That's why. Yes, that's why since long time there is one related with these issues, sustainability in tourism is ecotourism and marine ecotourism base and etc. The problem is only done in the big chains hotel. And they use more electricity, they use more chemical side and etc. This, I think, the consciousness should be what we call reinvent again to have really in the respected of the this environment, and then the sustainability of tourism can be achieved. I think this is the point. You know, in Indonesia, sometimes also we can see in the marine tourism, how can be fruitful for the marine tourism if we don't respect the environment? How we can have to keep this, the coral reef, the what is called the environment of the coral reef, if there is not avoidance of the environmental sound or respect to the environment. I think it's a must. Then now with the COVID, of course, this reminding again to all, the player in the tourism, of course, also the society, and of course also the customer, to really look at seriously what is called this environment or the sustainable tourism. I think that's the point. That's in my opinion.
Nahla, would you
yes, if I might
like
add
to provide
to that in terms of specifically the point of actioning the sustainability agenda? I know this has been a very problematic area because, as Benjamin mentioned, everybody's looking at growth, and after a period like COVID-19, after a slump like this, everybody's looking back to getting as much revenue as they can. But I think countries have also started realizing that this is, in the long term, this might cause a big problem. And we've seen a lot of action from certain countries in that direction. I think what will make it, what can make it more realistic is for communities or the populations to pressure their governments to deal with over-tourism, like we've seen in Barcelona, the protests and everything. Also for international organizations, they play a very important role in bringing up the concept of sustainability to governments, and we need some kind of pressure, like the pressure now, we mentioned Greenpeace mentioning that if there is going to be a bailout, then the aviation industry needs to have stricter regulations. All this, they all have to come together. I know till now all we've heard is talk, but we are hopeful that it's not going to be talk in the coming period. So I hope that also that's our view on that. I hope it turns into a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Nahla, and thank you, Paswapta. I think that's all the time we have for questions. I don't want to keep everyone much longer than this. As I mentioned, we'll try as much as possible to answer the rest of the questions and send our responses by email along with a copy of this brief. I'd like to thank you for joining us on the webinar. I'd like to thank Paswapta and Nahla for your valuable comments and presentations. And I'd like to ask participants, once we close the webinar, you will see a survey that will come up. It's a very brief survey, I believe 4 to 5 questions that will help us improve our future webinars. So if you can please take a minute or two to answer the questions and provide your feedback, that would be really helpful. I do hope that you will stay in contact with us at Dinar Standard. If you wish to receive further information on future webinars or receive our insight briefs or upcoming reports, please go to our website and sign up to our newsletter. And I look forward to seeing you at future webinars. And please reach out individually if you'd like to schedule a meeting or to talk. And we'd love to hear your views. Thank you very much and take care.
Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Stay healthy,
Walaikum assalam.
And stay happy with the tourism global.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.